In this worksheet called YTD and percent increase, we're going to put in some formulas in row 5 here that calculate our year-to-date profits. A relatively simple formula, although one that can be a little tricky and one that brings out the idea of cell references and how we work with them in Excel. In cell B5, our year-to-date profit so far is simply the same as the number we see above it. Now, we could type a 20 here, and that might look correct for now, but the profit above it is actually a calculation showing sales and overhead difference. What if those numbers get changed? For example, we find out that maybe the sales number is 125 or the overhead is 125. We have a negative possibly here. What would happen then to the 20 that we just typed in here? It would stay the same and it would be incorrect. So what we really want here for January, and January only, is for this always to be equal to the cell above it. Now, as we're looking ahead toward February, we don't want that kind of a formula there. In February, our year-to-date profit will be 50. So let's go back to January here and make this formula be equal B4. You can simply click on it or type it. Either way, press enter. And so that means if we adjust overhead, maybe our expenses were a lot higher and they really went to 125. As I type this in place, both profit and YTD profit below this will change. In this case, it's a negative, which we hope not to see, but that's what happened. So I'll undo that, Control Z. Now, as we look ahead to February here, we know the answer is going to be 50. How did I get 50? I added these two. But now I'm thinking, as I look toward March, if the February year-to-date is going to be the sum of these two, if I write a formula here that adds those two, what happens if the formula gets copied here? The March year-to-date will be 80. And yet by the end of March, we will have made 100. Now, we could think of these as dollars or thousands of dollars, but the main idea here is, as we move rightward here, we don't want to just be adding up the last 2 months. We really want to be adding up the current value, the current month, added on to the previous year to date. So remember, we could get the answer 50 here by adding these two cells or by adding these two. And the more you think it out, the more you recognize we want to be adding these two cells, not these two. And as we write this formula, it makes no difference which one we mention first. If you use the analogy of I'm depositing money into a bank, so I want to add it to my previous balance, then here's the deposit or the new number plus our previous balance this way. So however you want to think it out, just remember the idea, we're adding on to what we already have. And so our answer here is 50, 30 plus 20, these two. And if we drag this to the right using the fill handle into column G, we should have correct answers all the way across. And this value that we have right here should be the same as that. And it is. So one by one here, we see what's happening. Not a difficult formula, really, maybe a little tricky at first, but it's something you learn to deal with. It emphasizes the idea that the formula here, which is adding the cell above and the cell to its left, when we copy it, we're copying that same kind of relationship. So every one of these formulas here is adding the cell above to the cell to its left in each case here. So in this case, it's going to be G4 plus F5. That's the way it is.